Okay.
Um, what are some examples of misleading marketing practices?
Well, I've got several. Some of the things that I'll talk about are things that I'm sure you've heard in the news. But let me start off really simply by saying that it's against the law to advertise or market something in a way that is false or misleading. That's the
Mhm.
basic principle. And our position is that false or misleading marketing practices, it harms one, consumers, two, it harms businesses who are engaged in honest business practices, and thirdly, it has a negative impact on the economy. So when I think about some examples of what I do, so my directorate is involved in, for example, false or misleading representations is one thing we're looking at in marketing practices. Another area, unsubstantiated performance claims. A
Mm.
third area, drip pricing. You might have heard about junk fees in the economy. So that's another area of focus for us. Fake urgency cues is another area. Greenwashing, the importance of the
Mm.
environment, greenwashing, and fake reviews. So, and I can talk about each of these different practices if you'd like. I can break them down for you and give you a little bit more details if that could help.
I think a brief explanation on each would be perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
because some of the stuff I've actually never thought of before. So
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
really have much to connect it to in my brain.
So let me start first by saying, so at a general level, like I said, the act prohibits anyone from making a false or misleading representation to promote a business or a product. And once we decide that a representation is false or misleading, a court then has to look at what we call the general impression that's conveyed by that representation. So what is the consumer seeing? So the general impression. And as well, the court will look at the literal. We look at things like performance claims, and in a few minutes, I'll talk a little bit more about performance claims, but advertisers cannot make a claim about a product's performance or its effectiveness or its length of life without it being based on what we refer to as adequate and proper testing. And that testing has to be in place before the advertiser makes those representations, not after. So
Right.
so now let's go into the different, types of marketing, and I'll get back into the performance claims as well. But drip pricing, and I talked about that, junk fees, you've heard about that in our marketplace. Often you'll hear the reference to junk fees. And it's a common misleading practice that it occurs when companies offer a low price to attract the consumer to that product, when then after it's been the consumer's anchored to that attractive first price, the company then adds mandatory fees to make it such that that initial price was never attainable. So that price is, what they do is they drip these additional mandatory fees. And this is against our law. And, when you add additional fixed charges and fees, you need to disclose them up front, not after you've anchored the consumer. And I'll give you an example.
I'm
Talking
thinking
about,
of an example right now of something personal.
yeah. So here's the thing, like, and I'm not talking about sales tax. So those
Mm.
fees that are imposed by government, that doesn't fall into this. So, for example, we took on a number of years ago Ticketmaster,
Oh,
StubHub, and Ticket Network
yeah.
on drip pricing because of these additional fees that they were dripping onto consumers, so that the initial price for a ticket to a sports event, for example, or an entertainment event was actually not attainable because of these additional dripped on fees. We
Yeah.
also took on car rental companies in the same kind of practice. And again, all of the major car rental companies have been subject to inquiries or investigations by the Bureau. And again, because what we don't want is a consumer to be falsely led to a fictitious price that's simply unattainable, because as a business that you're going to add all these additional prices are going to be added on. So that's one area of what we're doing. Recently, of course, the Cineplex case was another case that we've been involved in, and this had to do with an online booking fee that was dripped.
I remember that.
Yeah. And I can't talk too much about that case because it is before the courts right now, but it's another example of drip pricing. Let me then turn, if I can, Carson, to the fake urgency cues that I mentioned. And so here, what we're looking at is using false claims to pressure the consumers, to pressure you, the buyer, into buying something. And they basically trick or manipulate you into making a choice that you might not have otherwise made. So, and this, when you hear of urgency cues, you could think of things like, these countdown timers or these pop-ups, these alerts or messages. And so the consumer feels pressure. They've got to buy it. They don't have enough time, right? You're flexing like you get what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, this is actually, again, relating to something that I think was something that I experienced earlier this year. So I definitely want to get your opinion on that later.
Yep, absolutely. And so this is another tactic that's used. That's another misleading practice. The other one that's also very important in my office right now is greenwashing. And this is when companies make environmental claims that are false or misleading or that are unsupported by these adequate and proper tests. And this practice, is used by businesses to create that impression that a product or a service or a business as a whole is greener than it actually is. So companies engage in this practice because Canadians want to purchase items that are less harmful for the environment, right? So if something seems to be good for the environment and I need that product, and there's another product that doesn't have those attributes, I'm going to go ahead and purchase it. So it's luring the consumer to these products that are represented as being good for the environment, when in fact, they end up not being as good. So that's greenwashing. And a case, for example, that I can mention is the Keurig case, for example. So we took on Keurig for the recyclability of its K-Cup pods. So they were advertising that their K-Cup pods were recyclable in all of Canada. And after our investigation, we found out that no, they were only recyclable in 2 provinces in Canada, Quebec and British Columbia. So as a result we settled with the company, and we were able to come to a resolution with the company. And one of the things they had to do was to remove the labeling that said recyclable in all of Canada, right? So they had to amend their labels so that people knew what they were buying. And so that's another example. That's an example of greenwashing. The other marketing practice that's really also at the forefront of what I do is consumer reviews. So these are, when you help both consumers and businesses, we know they can provide a wealth of product information to help people shop, be smarter, and they reward businesses that provide a greater product choice or service. Shoppers, we say, they trust these reviews, and they trust that they're from real customers that actually tried the products. But what we see happening is oftentimes these are fake reviews, and these can damage trust and can seriously erode what I refer to as consumer confidence. And this is a problem for us. So that's another kind of practice that I would say, is also very important in the kind of work that we do.
Yeah, and thank you for breaking that down, because I feel like too, especially the first 2 you mentioned, I feel like that really resonated with me, and something I couldn't quite put my finger on to a situation that occurred. And I'm probably not going to just go into it too deep while we're recording this, but what I will say about it is it's very interesting to hear it from someone working with the Bureau being like, this is not an appropriate practice. And it's validating in a way. So thank you for that.
If you want to hear more stories, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like. To support more youth by youth led projects, visit us at youthspeak.ca, where you can donate and spread youth mental health awareness.
YouthSpeak Charity. Speak, inspire, change.